Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get into this one.
Yeah, I am too, because what if I told you that the exact reason you are utterly exhausted, perhaps making more money than you ever have, was perfectly diagnosed by a group of refugees living in a weed-choked, ruined city about 2,500 years ago?
It sounds like a stretch, but it is incredibly accurate.
Right, because, usually when we try to diagnose a problem in our lives, we expect precision. Think about how we treat our physical bodies. If you fall and your arm swells up, you go to the hospital.
Exactly.
The doctor takes an x-ray, pulls up the image, points to a jagged white line on the screen and says, there it is, that's the fracture.
It's binary. I mean, it's totally visible. You're either broken or you are not. And the treatment plan is mapped out immediately.
Exactly. It's objective, and there is something deeply, deeply comforting about that.
Yeah.
We crave that same visibility for our internal lives, don't we?
We really do.
We want to take an x-ray of our burnout or our spiritual fatigue or that creeping sense of existential dread we feel on a Sunday night. We want to slap a neat little label on it and just apply a neat little fix.
But the reality is, when you step into the landscape of human priority or moral health and spiritual purpose, the X-ray machine is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
Right. Because you are pointing to a feeling of absolute emptiness, but you're holding a healthy paycheck.
Yeah.
You are pointing to a feeling of profound loneliness while sitting in a perfectly decorated, comfortable house. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
And that murky diagnostic water is exactly where we are heading today. We are doing an exclusive, comprehensive exploration, a real deep dive into the biblical book of Haggai.
Which is a fascinating text.
It really is. And our mission here is to be your guides through this ancient work. We aren't here just to recite historical dates or give a theology lecture.
No, definitely not.
We are here to help you extract the practical wisdom, the moral insight, and the real-life application from a community that was dealing with, severe burnout, completely misaligned priorities, and chronic economic frustration.
Which is why this text, despite being written 2.5 millennia ago, feels almost uncomfortably modern.
Uncomfortably modern is a great way to put it.
Yeah, because the human mind, how we justify our choices, how we hide from our deepest purposes, how we mask our procrastination as prudence, that has not changed one bit. Haggai is holding up a mirror to the ancient world, but the reflection is unmistakably us.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the weight of what Haggai is saying, we have to understand the world he is speaking into.
The context is everything here.
Right. So I want you, listening right now, to imagine the year is around 520 BC. We are in the second year of the reign of King Darius of the massive Persian Empire.
A huge, sprawling empire.
And the Jewish people have finally returned home from 70 long, agonizing years of captivity in Babylon.
And that historical context is crucial because it sets up the psychological state of the audience.
Oh, they've been through a lot.
Oh, an unbelievable amount of trauma. The Babylonians, under King Nebuchadnezzar, had completely leveled Jerusalem 70 years prior. They burned the magnificent temple, the one built by Solomon, literally to the ground.
Just totally destroyed it.
Totally. And they took the best and brightest of the population as captives back to Babylon. So for 70 years, an entire generation grew up in exile.
Wow.
Then the geopolitical landscape shifted. The Persians conquered the Babylonians, and a previous Persian king, Cyrus, decreed that the Jewish refugees could finally go home and rebuild.
It sounds like a triumphant cinematic moment, The exiles return, the music swells.
It really does.
But the reality of returning to a city that has been an abandoned ruin for 7 decades is far less glamorous.
Much less glamorous.
They come back, they clear some of the rubble, they set up a makeshift altar, and they manage to lay the foundation for a new temple. And then the movie montage abruptly stops.
It grinds to a complete screeching halt. Because laying a foundation is exciting, but the actual grueling work of building a massive stone structure in a hostile environment, that is exhausting.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and they immediately face intense political and social opposition from the surrounding people groups, particularly the Samaritans, who absolutely did not want to see Jerusalem fortified again.
So they were actively trying to stop them.
Oh, yes. These opponents actually sent letters to the Persian bureaucracy to stall the project. They hired counselors to frustrate the builders.
So there is a massive bureaucratic stop work order, basically.
Precisely. The external pressure was very real. But then the political climate eventually softens. The initial hostile Persian kings pass away, and Darius, who is much more tolerant, comes to power. The external roadblock is effectively lifted.
Okay, so they can build again.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the building does not resume. For 16 years, the foundation just sits there in the center of their community, completely choked by weeds.
16 years. Just think about that timeline for a second.
A long time.
A child born the year they laid the foundation is now learning to drive. You know what I mean?
I get you. Coming of age.
Right, coming of age. And all they have ever known is this half-finished, abandoned project sitting right in the middle of town. Which brings us to the core diagnosis of their problem. Haggai comes onto the scene, and he targets two main leaders, right?
Yes. Zerubbabel, the civil governor, and Joshua, the high priest. But he's really using them to speak to the general population.
And what is the excuse the people are giving for this 16-year delay?
Well, they're walking past these ruins every single day, and their collective justification is this. They say, the time hasn't yet come, the time for the Lord's house to be built.
Not yet.
Not yet. It is perhaps the most dangerous phrase in the human vocabulary.
That's so true.
Notice the psychological nuance here. They weren't saying, we hate the temple. They weren't saying, we are openly rebelling against God and we will never, ever build it.
Right, they weren't burning the blueprint.
Exactly. They were simply saying, now isn't the optimal time.
It's procrastination masquerading as responsibility.
That is exactly what it is. As historical commentators have noted, they were constantly waiting for a more convenient season. They rationalized their apathy.
How so?
They told themselves, look, we are just refugees. We are just getting on our feet economically. The Persian government has been unpredictable. We need to secure our own supply chains and our own economy first before we take on a massive communal spiritual project.
Honestly, it sounds incredibly pragmatic.
It does.
In fact, if I'm looking at this purely from a survival standpoint, I kind of agree with them. Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. If you are a refugee returning to a wasteland, isn't it just natural to secure your own roof before you build a massive community center?
Yes. On the surface, it makes perfect sense.
But Haggai calls them out on the hypocrisy of their pragmatism, doesn't he? Because while they're saying not yet to their highest spiritual calling, what are they actually doing with their own homes?
They're living in what the text calls paneled houses.
Paneled houses.
And this is where the hypocrisy becomes visible. In the ancient Near East, a paneled house wasn't just a house with a roof to keep the rain out. Paneled meant it was adorned with expensive wood, likely cedar imported all the way from Lebanon.
Oh, wow.
This was luxury. This was the exact high-end material that was historically supposed to be used for the temple itself.
So they weren't just surviving. They weren't just building basic mud brick shelters to keep their kids safe.
Not at all.
They were tricking out their living rooms with imported hardwoods, while the center of their community's spiritual and moral life was a literal weed patch.
Exactly. They took the resources, the energy, and the focus that rightfully belonged to their highest purpose, and they channeled it entirely into personal, material comfort.
Man.
And this brings us to the core wisdom of Haggai's message. When you actively defer your deepest purpose for the sake of superficial comfort, the result you get is not actually comfort.
What is it then?
The result is a pervasive existential starvation.
That is a heavy phrase. Existential starvation. And the text gives us this incredibly vivid, almost haunting description of what that starvation looks like, right?
It really does.
Haggai says to the people, you have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you aren't filled with drink. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages to put them into a bag with holes in it.
A bag with holes. I cannot think of a more piercing metaphor for the modern condition.
Seriously.
You labor, you strive, you put your money, your energy, your youth into the bag, and it just vanishes. There is a seeming result of all the labor, something to allure your hopes, but immediately it slips through. It is a wearisome, vexing cycle.
Yeah, it's just leaking out.
You are eating the food in your paneled house,
yeah,
but your hunger isn't satisfied because you are hungering for the wrong thing entirely.
I really want to push back on this, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener who is commuting right now, maybe grinding through a 60-hour work week.
Fair enough.
Because we live in a world of inflation, insane housing markets, and constant economic pressure. We have bills to pay. Look at modern hustle culture. We are told that if we just grind hard enough, get the nice house, secure the bag, we will finally be safe.
Right.
Is Haggai saying that having a nice house is inherently evil? Is providing for your family wrong?
No, absolutely not. The text is not a condemnation of architecture or personal security.
Okay, good.
The issue is the absolute inversion of priorities. When the paneled house, the pursuit of material accumulation status and external security becomes your ultimate goal, and the temple, which represents your relationship with the divine, your highest moral calling, your foundational purpose, is abandoned in the weeds, the universe pushes back.
That makes a lot of sense.
You are attempting to find ultimate, infinite satisfaction in finite material things. And as the great historical commentator Matthew Henry observed, meat for the belly perishes, and if we labor for that only, we're in danger of losing our labor.
So it's about the fact that a paneled house can never hold the weight of your soul's need for meaning. Exactly. You are asking your career or your bank account to be your God. And it's a terrible God because it constantly leaks. It's a bag with holes.
Well said.
But here is where we hit a massive obstacle to growth for a modern reader. We need some serious wisdom with discernment right here. Haggai actually says that God actively called for a physical drought on the land.
Yes, the text is explicit about that.
Yeah.
God says, I called for a drought on the land, on the mountains, on the grain, and on all the labor of the hands. He says, you looked for much, and behold, it came to little, and when you brought it home, I blew it away.
Now, for a modern listener, this idea of a micromanaging, punitive deity who ruins the weather, starves cattle, and destroys the economy just because he's annoyed about a building project, that is deeply uncomfortable.
It is.
It feels petty. It feels like ancient superstition, The kind of thinking where if it rains, the gods are happy, and if it's dry, we need to sacrifice something. How do we extract enduring wisdom from a concept that feels so primitive?
It is a very understandable resistance. To grasp the wisdom here, we have to distinguish the ancient theological framing from the profound underlying reality it represents.
Okay, break that down for me.
In the ancient world, there was no concept of a detached secular meteorological system. Every natural event, rain, drought, a good harvest, a blight, was seen as the direct, immediate, sovereign action of God.
Right, there's no weather app.
Exactly. But if we look past the ancient framing to the deeper truth, the text is teaching us that the universe has a moral grain to it.
A moral grain? That's a fascinating way to put it.
Think of it like a piece of wood. If you run your hand along the wood with the grain, it's smooth. If you insist on rubbing your hand violently against the grain, you are going to get splinters.
Ouch. Yeah.
When our foundational priorities are completely misaligned, when we seek material accumulation at the direct expense of our spiritual and moral purpose, our environment, our relationships, and our internal state begin to wither. We experience a spiritual and emotional drought.
So we're getting splinters.
Yes. We put our energy into a bag with holes because we are violating the fundamental design of what makes a human life meaningful.
So the drought, or, the modern equivalent of burnout, the failing relationships, the feeling that your wages are disappearing, isn't just an angry deity throwing lightning bolts. It's a diagnostic symptom.
Exactly.
Let's bring back that broken X-ray machine we talked about earlier. We said the X-ray is broken because you can't see the internal rot. But Haggai is saying the drought is the X-ray.
Yes.
It's the check engine light coming on in your car. It's the universe or God saying, look at your dashboard. You are out of oil. You are running on empty. You are grinding 60 hours a week for a paneled house, but your soul is starving to death.
The delays, the frustrations, the lack of fulfillment, they are an intervention. It is the awakened conscience.
That's huge.
God is forcing the question upon their minds by asking why. He says in the text, why? Says the Lord of armies, because of my house that lies in ruins, while each of you is busy with his own house. The drought is meant to wake them up from their material absorption.
It makes you wonder, if you're listening to this right now on your commute or while doing the dishes, what are the paneled houses in your own life?
What a great question.
What are the superficial comforts, the career milestones, the status symbols that you are pouring all your energy into, while the temple, your core purpose, your mental health, your family relationships, your spiritual grounding lies in ruins?
Are you trapped in the not yet?
Exactly. Are you waiting for a mythical, convenient season that is never, ever going to arrive?
Because the tragic irony of the convenient season is that the longer you wait, the heavier the dread becomes. 16 years of walking past that ruined foundation. You can imagine the psychological weight of that.
It must have been crushing.
Every time they left their beautiful cedar homes, they saw the rubble of their failure.
Which makes the next part of this story absolutely mind-blowing. Once they actually received this harsh diagnosis, once they realized they were holding a bag with holes, the way they pivoted is staggering. Let's look at how fast this change actually happens.
The historical timeline here is thrilling. Haggai delivers this incredibly confronting message on the first day of the 6th month.
Okay.
And the text tells us that Zerubbabel the governor, Joshua the high priest, and the remnant of the people actually listened.
They didn't get defensive?
They didn't get defensive.
Yeah.
They didn't form a committee to study the feasibility of the temple over the next 5 years. They didn't hire a consultant to write a white paper.
Right. They didn't do the classic corporate stall tactic.
No, not at all. They obeyed the voice of the Lord. They felt the reverence of the moment. And within just 23 days, by the 24th day of that exact same month, they went to work on the house of the Lord.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing this right. 23 days to reverse 16 years of complete paralysis.
Yes.
That completely shatters the modern myth that you need months of intense therapy, perfect conditions, and a flawless business plan to change your life.
It really does.
They had 16 years of deeply ingrained habits, 16 years of excuses, 16 years of geopolitical anxiety, and they broke it in 3 weeks just by starting.
They broke the paralysis through immediate action.
Yeah.
And the core wisdom here is found in God's immediate response to that action.
And what does he say?
Well, the people finally step up, they gather around the ruins, and God sends Haggai back with a message that is astonishingly simple. It is only 4 words long in English. I am with you.
I am with you. That's it. No massive blueprint. No lecture about the 16 wasted years.
Notice what God doesn't say. He doesn't say, I will be with you once you finish the roof and prove you're serious this time. He doesn't say, I will be with you when the temple is perfectly gilded and restored to its former glory.
Wow.
He doesn't demand perfection before offering his presence. The text says the Lord stirred up their spirit. The very second they aligned their actions with their true purpose, the existential drought began to break.
This is where the psychology of this text is just brilliant. Think about the paralyzing dread of a massive project. For the listener, maybe it's writing a book or changing career paths or finally having that incredibly difficult boundary-setting conversation with a toxic family member.
We all have something like that.
We build it up in our heads. You avoid it for years. You tell yourself, I don't have the emotional bandwidth. I don't have the time. The Persian Empire is against me. Whatever your excuse is. The dread is physically heavy. It sits on your chest.
It does.
But the moment you actually sit down and lay the first brick, the mental block just vanishes.
Because the dread isn't really about the work itself. The dread is generated by the avoidance of the work.
Oh, that's good.
It is the cognitive dissonance of knowing what you should do and actively choosing not to do it. As Matthew Henry points out in his commentary on this passage, they went to work on the 24th day to show that those who have lost time must redeem it quickly.
Yeah, you don't wait.
You don't sit around wallowing in the 16 years you wasted. Wallowing is just another form of self-centered delay. You just start on day 24.
The action precedes the feeling. We have this backward in our modern culture. We think, I need to feel motivated and then I will act. But Haggai is showing us that God stirred up their spirit as they were stepping into the ruins.
Precisely.
The momentum came from the obedience. And that promise, I am with you, is the ultimate antidote to the bag with holes.
Exactly. The bag with holes is the inevitable result of trying to sustain yourself entirely on your own strength for your own selfish, isolated ends. You are pouring your finite energy into a void.
Right.
But I am with you means you are now plugged back into the ultimate, infinite source of meaning and support. You are no longer alone in the labor. Your work now has eternal resonance.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to mentally identify that one long-delayed, meaningful task in your life, that temple you've left in the weeds. Do not worry about finishing it. Do not stress about the architectural plans for the roof. Just lay the first stone today.
Send the difficult email.
Yes, send the email. Make the apology. Schedule the therapy appointment. Open the blank document. Notice how that crushing dread immediately shifts into momentum when you finally step out of the not yet trap.
It is incredibly liberating to take that first step. But, and this is a crucial pivot in human nature and in Haggai's message, just because you start the work and just because you feel that initial rush of momentum does not mean the journey is suddenly easy.
Of course not.
In fact, as soon as you lay that first stone, you inevitably hit a brand new, insidious roadblock.
And that roadblock is a monster. We are now moving into the 7th month, specifically the 21st day of the month. So they've been building for a little less than 4 weeks. And the timing here is critical because the 21st day of the 7th month happens to be the end of the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yes, the Feast of Tabernacles was a major, joyous Jewish festival commemorating their ancestors' time wandering in the wilderness after escaping Egypt. It was supposed to be a time of immense gratitude and celebration.
A big party.
Right. But the mood among the builders in Jerusalem is not festive at all. In fact, they are deeply depressed.
Why? They finally started the work. They broke the 16-year curse. Why are they depressed?
Because of comparison. Specifically, comparison to an idealized, glorified past.
Ah, comparison, the thief of joy.
Exactly. The text tells us that there were old men in the crowd, elders in their 70s or 80s, who had survived the 70-year Babylonian captivity.
Okay.
These elders had been children before the exile. They had actually seen the original temple built by King Solomon with their own eyes before Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. And they look at this new foundation, built by a scrappy, poor, struggling remnant of refugees, and they weep loudly.
The psychological burden of that is immense. Imagine you are a young builder, you are sweating, hauling rocks out of the rubble, feeling good about finally doing the right thing. And you look over, and the older generation, the ones who know what true greatness looks like, are just sobbing at how pathetic your efforts are.
It's devastating.
Haggai asks them directly, summarizing the mood. Who is left among you who saw this house in its former glory? How do you see it now? Isn't it in your eyes as nothing?
As nothing. It is the crushing weight of the nostalgia trap. They are looking at their humble, hard-fought present reality and judging it against a golden age.
I want to interject here because I think it's very easy for a modern self-help book to just say, hey, don't compare yourself to others. Don't live in the past. Your best is enough.
It sounds good on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, but let's be historically honest for a second. Solomon's temple wasn't just a little nicer than what these refugees were building. It was objectively, historically, mind-blowingly magnificent.
Oh, it was one of the wonders of the ancient world.
Right. The commentaries note it was literally covered in pure gold. The floors, the doors, the massive carved cherubim. We are talking about millions and millions of dollars worth of gold built at the absolute zenith of Israel's geopolitical and economic power.
Unimaginable wealth.
So the elders weren't just being dramatic, they were stating a physical fact. This new temple was inferior in every material way. So my question is, how do you stay motivated when your current reality is objectively, measurably less impressive than your past, or than someone else's highlight reel?
That is the profound question Haggai addresses, and it requires a complete redefinition of how we measure glory and success.
Okay, how does he do it?
God's response to their collective depression is fascinating. He doesn't coddle them, and he doesn't promise them a magical gold mine to make this new building just as shiny. Instead, he says something that reorients their entire value system. The silver is mine and the gold is mine.
Which means what exactly? I could give you gold if I wanted to, but I don't care about it?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
God is utterly unimpressed by material wealth. As the 19th century scholar Albert Barnes points out in his commentary, God does not need gold to make his house glorious because all the wealth of the world, every ounce of silver in the earth's crust, already belongs to him. The people were judging the value of their work by external material metrics. They thought God needed their architecture to be impressive. But God makes a stunning counterpromise. He says, "The latter glory of this house will be greater than the former, and in this place I will give peace."
The latter glory will be greater, but not because of the architecture, because of the peace.
Yes, and this is where the comparative insight becomes incredibly rich. Haggai relays God's promise that the desire of all nations shall come.
The desire of all nations.
Barnes synthesizes historical commentary here to show that during this specific era in antiquity, there was a mute, aching craving across the entire ancient world, not just among the Jews.
Really? Like where else?
We see it documented by Roman biographers in the Jewish Sibylline books and across various pagan philosophies. Humanity was exhausted by empire, by war, by the endless shaking of kingdoms. There's a collective human sigh of come and help us, a deep longing for ultimate restoration.
So the true glory wouldn't be the wood or the stones. The true glory would be that this humble, scrappy little building would be the site where that deep human longing for peace is finally met.
Precisely.
For Christians, this prophecy is seen as pointing directly to the coming of Christ, the Prince of Peace, who would physically walk into the courtyards of that very second temple centuries later.
Exactly. The universal wisdom here is that true glory is the fulfillment of that deep human longing for restoration and internal peace, not a fresh coat of gold paint. The presence of God makes the house glorious, not the budget of the building committee.
That is such a vital distinction. Because if you miss that, if you still think glory is about the gold, you end up like King Herod.
Ah, yes. Herod the Great. A perfect, tragic example of missing the point.
This is a great moment for wisdom with discernment. So, centuries after Haggai, King Herod comes along. He's a massive builder, incredibly wealthy, and famously paranoid.
Very paranoid.
And he decides he is going to literally fulfill Haggai's prophecy by lavishly renovating this second temple. He adds insane amounts of gold, massive marble stones, huge courtyards. He thinks, I'll make the glory of this latter house greater by just spending more money on it than Solomon did.
And he completely missed the spiritual reality. He tried to manufacture spiritual glory using material wealth. He was trying to buy the desire of all nations with architectural grandeur. He thought he could engineer peace with a larger bank account and a more intimidating building.
Did it work?
No. Material magnificence cannot replace spiritual glory. In fact, within a few decades of Herod finishing his massive golden renovations, the Romans came in 70 AD and burned it all to the ground again. The gold melted, the material glory vanished.
Which encapsulates the nostalgia trap in a nutshell. And we do this all the time. We judge our current season of life against an idealized golden past or against the hyper-curated, gold-plated highlight reels of other people on social media.
We really do.
You look at your humble, hard-fought progress. Maybe it's the slow, painful work you were doing in therapy. Maybe it's your modest new business that is just barely breaking even. Maybe it's your quiet, unimpressive family life. And the voice of nostalgia, the weeping elders in your own mind, looks at your current foundation and says, is it not in your eyes as nothing? Look at what you used to be. Look at what they have.
It is the voice that diminishes present faithfulness by comparing it to past aesthetics. And it is deeply toxic because it drains the energy required to actually build the present.
So if you are wrestling with this right now, I want you to think about how you can redefine glory in your life today. What if true glory in your current season isn't about reaching the income bracket you had before you got laid off? What if it's not about getting back to the physical shape you were in at age 25?
What if it's deeper?
Exactly. What if true glory for you right now means internal peace? What if it means integrity? What if it means showing up faithfully for your kids in a humble house rather than ignoring them to build a golden empire?
That shift in perspective, from external validation to internal peace, is what allows you to keep laying the stones even when the work feels small and uncelebrated.
That's beautiful.
But as we move forward in Haggai's message, we encounter another deeply uncomfortable truth about human nature.
Uh-oh.
Just because you are doing the work, just because you are laying the stones and ignoring the nostalgia trap, does not mean you are automatically immune to the toxic habits you've been carrying around.
Oh man, this is where it gets incredibly convicting. We are moving from external comparisons, looking at Solomon's gold, to the internal mechanics of how we actually live our lives. The core question Haggai is going to ask is this: does doing one good thing magically cancel out a toxic lifestyle?
And Haggai's answer is an emphatic, resounding no. To prove this point, the timeline moves forward again. It's now the 24th day of the 9th month. They have been building for 3 solid months, and Haggai walks up to the priests and gives them a theological pop quiz.
I love this part, a pop quiz on the law.
He asks the priests 2 very specific questions regarding the ceremonial laws of purity found in the book of Leviticus. Question 1. If someone carries holy meat dedicated for a sacrifice, in the fold of his garment, and that garment brushes up against bread or wine or oil, does that food become holy?
Okay, and what do they say?
The priests know their law, and they answer correctly, no. Holiness does not transfer by a secondary touch. It is not contagious in that way.
Right, just because my jacket touches something sacred, it doesn't make my groceries sacred.
Correct. Then Haggai asks question 2. If someone who is unclean by reason of touching a dead body touches any of that food, does the food become unclean? And the priests answer, yes, it will be unclean.
Hold on, let's unpack this, because to a modern listener, commuting to an office in the 21st century, all this talk about holy meat and being unclean from a dead body sounds bizarre. It sounds like ancient superstition. If we just read it literally and dismiss it, it becomes a huge obstacle to growth. Why is Haggai talking about dead bodies and meat when they're supposed to be building a temple?
To extract the enduring wisdom here, we have to recognize that the ancient concept of ritual impurity was not just a hygiene code. It was a profound, lived metaphor for moral integrity and the nature of contamination.
Metaphor for moral integrity.
The 17th century scholar and jurist Hugo Grotius distilled this ancient law into a brilliant psychological and moral truth. He wrote, "There are many ways of vice, but only one of virtue." What the law taught and what Haggai was leveraging is the reality that pollution is easily communicated, sanctification is not.
That is so profound. Let me give a modern analogy to make this crystal clear because it changed how I view this entire concept.
I'd love to hear it.
Think about a glass of pure, perfectly clear drinking water. If I take a single drop of black ink, just one tiny drop, and put it into that clear water, what happens?
It ruins the whole glass.
Right. The entire glass is ruined. It all turns cloudy. The pollution spreads instantly and effortlessly. But if I have a glass full of dark, muddy black ink and I add one single drop of pure, clear water to it, absolutely nothing happens. The clear water doesn't purify the ink. It just gets swallowed by the darkness.
That is an exceptional analogy.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates exactly what Haggai is telling the builders. The people of Judah had fallen into a psychological trap that we still fall into today. Moral licensing.
Moral licensing.
Yes, they thought that just by laying a few stones for the temple, by doing a little bit of holy work, their otherwise selfish, apathetic, and unjust lives would be magically blessed and purified. They thought their holy meat of building the temple would act as a drop of clear water that would purify the murky ink of their corrupt business practices, their neglect of the poor, and their self-centeredness.
They thought they could game the system. It's moral licensing. We do this all the time. It's the psychological phenomenon where doing one good deed makes us feel entitled to do a bad one. It's going to the gym for an hour, so you feel justified eating a terrible, unhealthy meal. Or, more seriously, it's the CEO who donates $1 million to a charity and uses that good deed to internally justify running a toxic, abusive workplace.
Exactly. We compartmentalize our lives. We want to believe that we can be toxic in our private lives, but as long as we show up at church on Sunday or volunteer once a month, we are fundamentally good.
But the dead body pollutes the whole thing.
Right. Haggai tells them, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, and so is every work of their hands. That which they offer there is unclean. Their underlying, unrepentant apathy and selfishness was the dead body. And in the ancient mindset, a dead body represents ultimate decay, the ultimate corruption of life. They were dragging this source of moral decay around with them, and it was polluting everything they touched, even their good deeds.
This brings us back to the broken x-ray machine. You can look at the x-ray of your career or your public persona, and it looks fine. You are building the temple, you are doing the work.
Looking good on paper.
Right, looking good on paper. But the x-ray can't detect the dead body of hidden apathy, resentment, or ethical compromise that you are quietly carrying in your pocket. Goodness requires intention. It requires boundaries. Decay is passive. You don't have to try to ruin the glass of water with ink. It just disperses.
Maintaining integrity requires discipline. You cannot compartmentalize your ethics. A rot in your character at home will inevitably bleed into your work. The dead body pollutes the whole system. You cannot sprinkle a little bit of good works over a foundation of toxic habits and expect to reap the peace that God promised.
So the reflection for you, the listener, is incredibly confronting but necessary. What is the dead body you are currently carrying around?
It's a hard question to ask yourself.
It really is. What is the unresolved conflict with your spouse? What is the hidden bad habit you indulge in when no one is watching? What is the toxic, cynical mindset or the small, ethical compromise you make at work every day? You might be working really hard on your temple right now, trying to improve yourself, trying to build a good life. But is there a hidden source of decay that is quietly polluting your best efforts?
It is a hard truth to face. But we must recognize the heart behind Haggai's message here. God isn't pointing out the dead body to condemn them to shame or despair. He is pointing it out to invite them into total holistic integrity.
That's an important distinction.
Because right after this harsh diagnostic truth, the tone shifts radically. God says, "Consider from this day and backward, I struck you with blight and mildew and hail, yet you didn't turn to me." He is reminding them of the diagnostic drought. But then he makes a promise. "From this day I will bless you."
From this day, the moment you recognize the dead body, drop it, and commit to true integrity, the blessing flows. It's the promise of a clean slate.
Yes, and that promise of a clean slate sets the stage for the grand finale of Haggai's message. We are zooming way, way out now. We are moving from the intensely personal question of individual integrity to the macro scale of global geopolitical instability.
This brings us to the final verses of the book, Haggai chapter 2, verses 20 through 23. And the context here is wild. On the exact same day that Haggai delivered the challenging message about the dead body and ritual impurity, he receives a second, private, highly specific message directly for Zerubbabel, the governor.
God speaks to Zerubbabel and uses apocalyptic, world-shaking language. He says, I will shake the heavens and the earth. I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the nations. I will overthrow the chariots and those who ride in them.
That is terrifying imagery, shaking the heavens and the earth, overthrowing chariots. What is going on geopolitically that prompts this?
Remember the macro context we discussed earlier. Darius is the king of the Persian Empire. This is a massive, sprawling superpower covering millions of square miles from India to Ethiopia.
Just huge.
And while there was relative peace for the Jewish remnant in Jerusalem at this exact moment, the Persian Empire itself was highly volatile. Darius spent the early years of his reign brutally suppressing massive, bloody revolts in Babylon, Elam, and other provinces. The ancient world was constantly trembling with the march of armies.
So it felt like the world was ending.
To them, yes. And God is looking past even the Persian Empire to the eventual rise and fall of all human empires. The Greeks under Alexander the Great, the iron grip of the Romans, all of them. He is promising a future where all opposing, violent human power structures will be ultimately dismantled.
But right in the middle of this terrifying promise of global upheaval, while talking about the collapse of empires and the destruction of armies, God zooms back in and gives Zerubbabel this incredibly intimate, deeply personal promise. He says, in that day, says the Lord of armies, I will take you, Zerubbabel, my servant, and will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you.
Like a signet ring. To truly feel the emotional and psychological weight of this promise, we have to look back at Zerubbabel's family tree. We have to understand the generational trauma he was carrying.
Okay, wait, hold on. What is the family history here? What did his ancestors do?
Zerubbabel was the grandson of King Jeconiah.
Jeconiah, okay.
Jeconiah was one of the last wicked kings of Judah, right before the Babylonian exile. He was an 18-year-old king who did evil, and when Nebuchadnezzar's army besieged Jerusalem, Jeconiah surrendered. He was dragged off in chains to Babylon.
Okay, that's bad.
And God spoke a devastating curse against Jeconiah through the prophet Jeremiah. You can read it in Jeremiah chapter 22. God said, as I live, even if Jeconiah were the signet ring on my right hand, I would pull you off and give you into the hands of those who seek your life.
Oh, wow. I would pull you off. He was the discarded ring, the broken lineage. God essentially threw his grandfather away.
Exactly. Jeremiah even goes on to say, write this man down as childless, a man who will not prosper in his days, for no man of his offspring will prosper, sitting on the throne of David.
That is bleak.
So think about Zerubbabel. He grows up in exile. He knows he is of the royal line of David, but he also knows the terrifying prophecy that his grandfather was the discarded signet ring plucked from the hand of God. He is living under the shadow of a generational curse. He must have wondered, am I doomed? Is my work pointless? Does God even want me?
That adds so much weight to the 16-year delay. If you secretly believe you are cursed by your family's history, why would you confidently build the temple? You'd be terrified of stepping out of line.
Precisely.
But now, God completely and explicitly reverses that curse. He looks at the grandson of the discarded king and says, I am making you my signet ring, for I have chosen you.
A signet ring in the ancient Near East wasn't just a piece of decorative jewelry, it was the king's signature. It was a seal, usually made of precious stone, engraved with the king's unique mark, pressed into wax or clay to authorize royal decrees.
So it's basically his official stamp.
Yes. It was an object of immense value, intimate physical closeness to the king's body, and ultimate unquestionable authority. It never left the king's hand. God is saying, while the empires of the world collapse and the economies are in turmoil, you, Zerubbabel, are precious, chosen, authorized, and perfectly secure.
It is a beautiful promise. But I have to ask, and I know the listener is wondering this too, it's great for Zerubbabel to get this specific, deeply personal promise that his generational trauma is healed. But what about us? We aren't the governor of Judah. When our modern kingdoms are shaking, when the tech industry is facing massive layoffs, when inflation is crushing our savings, when political systems feel chaotic and polarized and our social norms are upended, how do we find that level of security?
This is where we need to apply wisdom with discernment again and look at the historical reality of what actually happened to Zerubbabel. Because if we misinterpret this promise, we set ourselves up for massive disappointment.
Okay, so what actually happened to him?
Did Zerubbabel go on to become a massive global conqueror? Did he overthrow the Persian Empire himself? Did he become the wealthiest king on earth?
No. From what I understand, he finished the temple and then he just kind of fades from the historical record.
Precisely. He died in relative political obscurity. The promise of the signet ring was not a promise of earthly political dominance.
Yeah.
It wasn't a prosperity gospel promise that he would be immune to the struggles of life.
Okay.
The enduring wisdom here is that his true value, his signet ring status, was not contingent on the stability of the world around him or his own political ascendancy. For the Christian tradition, this promise is seen as being spectacularly fulfilled centuries later because Zerubbabel is listed in the genealogies of Matthew and Luke as a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ, the ultimate Prince of Peace. His faithful, quiet obedience in a small, obscure moment of history rippled into eternity. He was part of the lineage that brought salvation to the world.
So the promise is about intrinsic eternal worth, not temporary political power. The world around you can be shaking violently. The company you work for might be going under. The daily news cycle might be a constant, deafening stream of anxiety and anger. But your identity, your worth, your calling to be faithful to the moral and spiritual work right in front of you, that is unshakable.
Yes, you do not derive your ultimate value from the throne of kingdoms. You do not derive your peace from the stability of the Persian Empire or the Roman Empire or whatever modern empire you happen to live in. You derive it from being chosen and loved by the Creator. You are the signet ring.
Which gives us our final profound practice for the listener. When the news cycle feels exactly like the shaking of the heavens and the earth, when everything in your industry or your personal life feels unstable and chaotic, I want you to consciously, actively remind yourself of your intrinsic chosen value, a value that no external geopolitical event, no market crash, and no personal failure can ever take away. You are chosen. You have a purpose, and that purpose is entirely secure, even when the ground beneath your feet is violently shaking.
It is the ultimate grounding mechanism for human anxiety. When you truly know you are the signet ring, you suddenly realize you don't need the paneled house to prove your worth to your neighbors. You don't need to fear the weeping of the nostalgic elders. You can endure the shaking of the world because you know you are intimately held by the hand of the one who is doing the shaking.
And that brings us perfectly full circle because we started this deep dive talking about the sheer difficulty of diagnosing our internal burnout and our spiritual emptiness. That agonizing feeling of working yourself to the bone only to find you are holding a bag with holes.
The broken X-ray machine. We want to see the fracture, but all we feel is the exhaustion.
Yeah, exactly. The broken X-ray. But Haggai has given us a completely different lens to view our struggles through. He has shown us that the symptoms we hate are actually the diagnostics we need. So I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think back to that bag with holes. Think back to the delayed harvests in your life, the exhaustion, the feeling that your wages are just disappearing into the ether, the blights and the droughts you're experiencing right now. What if those very delays, those very frustrations, and those blights aren't just bad luck?
Right.
What if they aren't signs that you are fundamentally a failure? What if they are actually a profound, loving intervention? A tap on the shoulder from the universe, asking you to stop, to look at your foundations, to drop the dead body of apathy and moral compromise you've been carrying, and to finally step out of the not yet and start building what actually matters.
What if the drought you're experiencing is simply an invitation to stop drinking from a broken cup and find the true source of water?
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.